Hello, and welcome to Chapter 1 of Introduction to Security. So let's get started immediately. Remember that I am going to ask you to copy a couple of notes down as we move along. And when you're done copying these notes, I want you to submit those as homework for week 1, the video lecture. Okay? So don't forget that. All right, so here's the objectives for chapter 1. We're going to describe we're going to give you an overview of all the different types of security and in terms of securing information. And it's really everything that you will be covering this semester will go into details on every single one of them. Um, just hold on a second. Let me see. Let me minimize this and we'll get started immediately. Okay, so here we go. When you are talking about security, so we're talking about really two types of things. We're going to talk about personal security, how to protect your social security number, for example, your accounts, your personal accounts in bank accounts or credit cards or anything of that or anything of that nature. And also, we're going to be talking about information security, how to make sure that your data you can protect the confidentiality of the data, either if it's in standstill on your computer or when it's in transit. Um, Encryption is really the solution for in terms of securing your data. I'll tell you right now, offhand, 50% of the problems with security is not having a good password implemented. And in terms, and we're going to discuss that in details down the road. Also, making sure most of the problem, if you really implement a good confidentiality encryption method, you're pretty much protected. Knowing where to access your devices or your sensitive information from which devices and so on. We'll be discussing all of that. The biggest problem is really denial of service attacks. Somebody making sure, so if somebody does not want you to access a certain resource or computer or a server, that might be an issue. And we'll be able to discuss how to prevent that. In this course, it's going to be really informational more than anything else. There is no one solution to really cover and protect you from everything. But as long as you are aware and you are a little bit paranoid, that's really good, and you're in good hands. Which means attackers usually want to go in and out as quickly as possible. If they see a device or anything that is somewhat secure, they don't want to spend any time. They'll just go somewhere else. All right. So there are many different types of attacks out there, and sometimes they're very difficult to protect against. To prevent because some of them may just happen. We call them a zero-day attack. Somebody may just come up with a virus or an attack, and there is no solution for it. So you have to find a way on how to even prevent that. So we'll be talking about that as well. Um, when it comes to computing power, that's not really true. Making password breaking easy, because now we have the advanced encryption standard, the WPA2, if you are familiar with it in terms of the security on the wireless network. That takes trillions of years, even with today's computer CPU power, to really break the keys. And so it's not feasible for anybody to really try to brute force, which is guess your password. So that's really, this statement is not necessarily true nowadays. Now we can attack your phones, although most of the apps on the Android store and the Apple store are pretty good. They're clean, so they make sure that all the apps that are in there are pretty much clean. But you could have Bluetooth attacks, and which we'll discuss later on, or somebody just using, if you're not familiar with how to use your phone or download it, or they can track you using your location. So there's many things that you got to be very careful using your mobile devices as well. So we'll be discussing that as well. Examples of recent attacks. Oh God, these are just old ones actually. There's the Target attack. The last one that I just heard of, and we're in what, December of 2019 now, is the one that attacked what do you call it? The Marriott Starwood Hotel, where they have over 500 guests. They were able to get in there and capture, get their usernames, passwords, emails, passports. So the Marriott Hotels franchise took a big hit when they announced that their system was breached. So it cost them millions and probably billions of dollars and it's going to be a black eye for them for a while. So they really have to take steps and to take care of that. So there's plenty of different types of attacks, and some of them are really getting in the information out. Target been hit, Sony been hit, Amazon and eBay also been hit, but they were actually they had the security in place to protect them. Mastercard got hit, Blockbusters, you name it, almost anybody that they want, they can actually hit it. A lot of them is for some of them nowadays are for profit. They want to, they or just for just to get their name out there, or if the company if there's somebody is really, if you have a disgruntled employee or disgruntled somebody is really upset about a specific company, they can deny their services. They can always find the back doors to get in there. And most of these, if not all of these attacks, including the denial of service attack, is because of poor security management or there's an insider that really gives up the information. But here's an example of a whole bunch of different types of attacks. These are kind of all, but they're happening every day. You get the biggest and the greatest when you see them on TV, but there's plenty of them that are happening almost every day, and over 2 billion, if not just for personal attacks, you have over 2 billion types of $2 billion worth of damage happening with personal identities. Okay, what are the difficulties in defending the attacks? Usually they are universally connected devices, like over the internet. The increase of speed attacks, it can attack you within minutes, seconds to go in and out as quickly as possible. The sophistication of the attacks, you can go on the dark net and download the exploit kits, and some of them are free, and you can download them, and with minutes you can break into a WPA wireless network, for example. And you don't even, these are kiddies, script kiddies, we call them. They can go in and out as quickly as possible. You don't even have to have any experience of creating any of these attacks. There's plenty of them all over. We will have a course in the spring, I think, of 2020 on how to do some hacking. So we're going to do ethical hacking where you will learn to be the white hat hacker, so you can prevent and know exactly what the hacker is doing, so you can prevent against attacks that they are trying to deploy. Faster detection of vulnerabilities. They can scan and find out where your computer is vulnerable, which ports are open on the internet, and send you either a virus or whatever, something that can sit on your computer and gather information. All right, so here's point number one I want you to do. I want you to write these 5 points down in difficulties in defending attacks. Okay, so that's point number one. All right, so let's continue. All right, also you can delay in patching. If a software company, if a software that you have and the vendor sends you a patch that you need to install it and immediately deploy it. So make sure if you don't do that patch, if you do not install it immediately, you could be vulnerable for an attack. The reason that the vendor sends you that patch is to patch that security loophole. All right, distributed attacks. That's when you have a whole bunch of computers attacking your server, requesting, this is the denial of service attack, requesting services, and they're just it's a bogus request, and if a legitimate user is trying to come in and access the data, they won't be able to do because the server is busy doing all these different types of services for the bogus quote unquote attacks, and they try to confuse you sometimes. We'll talk about that, when we talk about social engineering down the road. All right, and here are some examples of difficulties in defending against these attacks. Many. Okay. What is information security? So when we're talking about information security, people think immediately, oh, we got to encrypt the data and things like that. Well, it's just true. Information security is to protect your data, either stand still on your computer while you're away. You have to be able to encrypt your data while if it's important, on the computer or on your laptop or on your mobile device, or is in transit. You have to be able to do that. There are different protocols and standards on how to um, make sure that you protect the confidentiality of the data. Making sure only the sender and the receiver are the ones who are able to see the data. Why is it important? Because it can cost you, for a company, it can cost millions of dollars. If it's a denial of service attack and they are an e-commerce company such as Amazon or eBay or any of these companies, it can cost them millions. In Netflix, for example, if their servers got attacked, they can use also billions of dollars, not even millions. Any company now, because they are all connected, it can cost them, you know, a fortune. And for your personal, you may not, somebody steals your credit card or your social security number. You don't want to go through the headache of proving, this is not you. So it is very important that you protect yourself. And again, like I said earlier, attackers usually stay away from um, systems that are protected because they want to break in as quickly as possible so they don't get caught. All right. So you have to be able to take steps to protect the person or property from harm. Okay, so sometimes you have to, just like we're going into the airports, you have to stand in line for the security check. So sometimes you have to sacrifice some convenience, right? You have to type in your password, even if it's, instead of typing a 5-character password, make it 15, make it a phrase. It, takes a couple, maybe a second or two more, but so what? You are well protected that way, right? All right. So the three things that you need to worry about when it comes to protecting the data, the information, it's called the CIA, the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of the data. Confidentiality means you want to protect the confidentiality of the data, means you want to make sure that only the sender and the receiver sees the data. That means you have to have a key. The data has to be encrypted while it's in transit, or it has to be also encrypted if it's on the hard drive, if it's a standstill. So only the ones that have the key will be able to view the data. Integrity, you want to make sure that the data that is being transmitted has not been tampered with. So you want to protect the integrity of the data. So you want to make sure that the data that you are sending is the data that is received. And the availability, you want to make sure that users always have access to their resources, really protecting against denial of service attacks. All right. I want you to write down, this is point number 2. I want you to type these 3 points. Write them down. The 3 types of information for protections are the confidentiality, integrity, and the availability. All right. So make sure you write that down. All right. So how do you do that? Protect the implement the secure information. You got to do the AAA. The AAA means the authentication, authorization, and accounting. Authentication is when you type in your username and password. Username and password is sent to a server. They validate the username and the password, and if they are okay, that means you are authenticated. You are the sender and the user. Then you are authorized. You're giving access to whatever, you're supposed to give access to. Maybe a 5 meg of, a 5 gig of hard drive and a certain applications. You are authorized to do that. And then accounting, you got to keep track of what that user actually used, when he logged in, when did he log out, and all of that. So if you can authenticate, authorize, and keep track of what the user actually did, you are well protected. The accounting is important because if anything goes wrong, you can always go back and see exactly if that person was an attacker or something went wrong. Okay, you could just authenticate and let them in and have full access. You probably don't want to do that. In our other classes, we'll be able to set up the AAA, by the way. All right, so here is the information security components. You can take a look at that. Let's just move on. All right, information security terminology. Let's take a look because we're going to be mentioning some of this, and I want to make sure you knew all of these. I want you to write all of this down too. That's point number 3. All of the information security terminologies. All right, an asset is anything that the organization buy, you know, buy to make the money, to make it productive. Everything is an asset in the company, from the computer to the chairs to the garbage can to the actual people. Otherwise, why would they purchase them? Why would they pay them money unless it's going to make them production? As we will discuss later on, if you are the responsible for securing all the assets in the company, you have to take inventory of all the assets, and then we'll take a look at which ones are vulnerable for attacks and which ones are not, and so on. So an asset is any item that has a value. Some of them, a garbage can maybe not that important, but it's still an asset, so you might not care if somebody steals it or not. But maybe a computer, a big server, that's very important. You don't want it to be attacked, or because that could cost you a fortune in you know uh, if something goes wrong. A threat is an action or an event that have the potential to cause harm. All right, so that's self-explanatory. The threat agent is the person, the thief, the person who's trying to do the attack mostly, or or the software, right? That's sitting on their computer, or the virus that's gathering information. Vulnerability is something that is a weakness. So if they see that you have a weak password, that's a vulnerability. If you left the default password and never made any changes, that's also a vulnerability. If you leave the door open and you walk away from your office and you never log out, that's a vulnerability as well, right? And then you got to look at the risk. What is the risk that there is? What's the likelihood that the thief is going to break in and steal, right? So you got to think about that. Is it, are you in a secured building? Are you in a location, are you in the airport so somebody can easily break into your system or even steal your device if you just left them open? So you got to think about that. All right. So those are some of the terminologies that we will be discussing. Here's an example of or an analogy with all of these terms come together, where the fence is the vulnerability, this is the agent, he could go through the fence, and so on. The rims is the assets, he wants to steal the rims of the car, and so on. All right, so when it comes to it, how do you deal with the risk? Do you accept it in terms of the garbage can, the garbage can in the room, and you leave the door open? You say, you know what, I'm going to accept the risk. If it gets lost, so what? Because most likely no one is going to steal the garbage can, and if they do, it's not worth protecting it. You can diminish because it's maybe costing you too much. Let's say you have a lot of computers in a lab, and what you do is, and these computers or these devices, servers, routers, they could be very, very expensive if they break down or get stolen. So what you want to do is get insurance, right? So that will diminish it. Oh, I mean, sorry, that's transferring the actual risk. Diminishing it, meaning you're protecting it. You lock the doors, maybe you bolt the desktop computers to the desks, and so on. All right, so preventing data theft, security often associated with prevention. So make sure that all the data that the business have, especially the proprietary information proprietary information is safe. The human resources will let you know about what you can and cannot do, what you can take outside and discuss with your competitors. That's down the road. We'll discuss when we set up a security policy that we were talking about. Credit card numbers, you have to be very careful with that as well, where you use your credit card and who you give your credit card to. Um, Using someone else's personal information in an unauthorized manner, of course, that's easy. When it comes to, for example, stealing someone's social security number, they can. Here's one thing I want you to always remember: never ever give your social security number to anyone. When you go, for example, to doctor offices, they usually ask for that on the applications. I never give it to them. There is no reason for you to give your social security to these people. It's not the person that's sitting behind the desk that's probably the person. They take your name, your date of birth, your social security number, and they store it somewhere. You don't know who's going to be there. And to take that information, and then the headache is you trying to clear yourself up. The only people you want to give your social security number is if you initiate the call to give out, like say you want to set up maybe a new credit card, and make sure when you give it, you are well secured. If you're doing it online, make sure you're setting it up through HTTPS. Make sure that there's an S and a lock in there, a yellow lock in there, and the URL. The IRS. By the way, IRS will never ever call you. If they need anything, they'll send you a letter. So if you get emails telling you the IRS wants this or that from you, ignore it. They will send you a letter with that or with anything that they want. Also, your bank. No one will ask you to click on this link to change your username or password or check your account. So make sure you are aware. All right. All right. Here are the different types of laws protecting the electronic data. Um, that's okay. Good to know. But that's if you really need to know any of that, you can get into details of these. You can look them up to get more information on any of these. The HEPA, the Starbucks, the GPLA, and all of that. GLBA. All right. So maintaining productivity. So depending on the time and money, you can actually use, for example, if you have 1,000 employees and their average is like $30 an hour, and if there is an attack, the number of employees to combat attacks is 10. You take 10 employees trying to solve the problems of 1,000 users, it can end up costing you $220,000 in salaries just to solve this 1,000 users, and you're only using 10 employees. So it can cost you a lot of money. Preventing it, will definitely be worth it. So this is you can actually take when you're presenting to the vice presidents or the presidents or the big admin, the companies, that they should spend some money on security. Down the road, it will definitely save them a fortune. All right. Cyberterrorism, there's a lot of, there's worries about the electric grid, the waters, the dams. Somebody can send, because they are all software controlled. And if they are connected if they are connected, you can actually send an infinite loop program that can disrupt the water flow or the electricity. You can have blackouts, for example. And even if you are not connected on to the internet, you can have viruses on USB drives that you can have an insider put a USB drive into one of those devices that can disrupt and make a whole big problem. Disrupt. Have a whole city, for example, cause panic, or even violence, or whatever. So cyber terrorism is really, it's a real thing, and the Department of Homeland Security is, they work 24/7, and they have thousands of employees deployed. Just they're worried more about cyber terrorism than anything else, and then God help us, where where's we're going to end up. So there's going to be really a big push into not only protecting your personal information, but the nation itself could be at harm. It can hit the banks, the military, energy, transportation, like I said, water systems. All of those could be a potential cyber terrorism attacks. All right, so let's look at who the attackers are. So on the next point, I want you to write the definition of each one of those. Who are the hackers, the script kiddies, spies, insiders, cyber criminals, and cyber terrorists? Okay, I'll go through them, but make sure you copy these down as part of your notes. Hackers, well, in hackers, there's the white hacker and the black hat hacker. Um, in the old days, a hacker was always the white hacker. It had the positive connotation. He's a computer programmer. A hacker used to know to be a computer programmer, and they knew all the codes. You had to figure out all the bugs in a program, trying to really solve a problem where there's a loophole. Now, a black hatter, on the other hand, is using, still a computer scientist that can find out those security loopholes and use them for malicious purposes or to disrupt or for profit reasoning. Script kiddies is anyone that unskilled users, kids at home can download an exploit kit off the internet and use it to attack or send viruses or whatever. They don't even have to know any type of they don't even have to have any background in computer science to do any of that. Computer spies is a person who's hired to break into a computer to steal information, right? Or even could be a software that gathers information. You can send a software on a specific computer that just sits there and find out what you're doing. There's spywares for the reasons trying to find out what you're doing, or information just gathering, as we will discuss later on. Um, Keyboard loggers, they find out everything that you type and they can send it to the criminal and find out, your usernames, password, account numbers, or whatever that you're typing. There's ways to protect you against all of that. Insiders, this is the biggest problems. If you have thousands and thousands of employees, and you have to give them some sort of rights and privileges to do their work. So they could be vulnerable for attacks or exploits from outside. So if I am a criminal, if I cannot break into your firewall, but I know a person who can get in, I'll exploit them. You spoof them, use their username or password, to steal the username and password and try to get through, right? Or maybe bribe them to allow me to break in. Cyber criminals, and these are, network attackers, identity thieves, spammers, all of these. They'll be willing to do anything. Mostly nowadays are for financial gains. They use them. Okay. Well, cyber terrorists. That's also a big problem. Again, this is like breaking into. They want to cause fear. They want to terrorize city, a country, or whatever that they want to do. So they want to do harm, and this is where countries can attack each other to disrupt whatever they're doing, and it's probably happening today. All right. So what kind of defenses, the attacks and defenses that we can do? The steps of the attacks. Okay. The steps of the attacks. You have to probe for information first. So what you do is you scan the reconnaissance, figure out where the vulnerabilities are, and then you launch the attack. As soon as you launch the attack, you modify the security settings so you protect yourself, and then you circulate to other system. Propagate from one system to the other, so you'll be very hard to detect, and then you bring the whole network down. Okay, so please write that also as an point. Those are typically the steps of attack of anyone, of exploit kits or any, pretty a pretty good attacker. That's what they would do. probe for information, do a reconnaissance, figure out what's opened and what's not, and then do the attack. And as soon as they get the attack, they go in and they escalate their privileges. They hide themselves, or they give themselves that they cannot be deleted. Give themselves some supervisory rights and privileges that even the admin cannot get rid of them, and go hide somewhere else and propagate if you are on a network from one system to another, so that you can bring the whole network down. All right, so what can you do? Some defenses. Okay, this is another set of points that I want you to do. The principles for defenses is layering, limiting, diversity, obscurity, and simplicity. So let's go over each one of them, and I want you to write the points of each one of them. Layering means you want to have different layers of security. You know, maybe maybe when you go into the front door, you'll show your badge, and when you go into another door, you have to type in a password. That's 2 or 3 layers. Uh, a single defense system is hard. When you type in your password, for example, they'll send you maybe your bank will say, okay, your password is good. Now I see that you're um, trying to access your system from a different computer. We have to send you a PIN using your phone and things like that. It is important that you have layers. So this way, if the attacker goes to one layer, hopefully the different layer will be able to prevent it. Limiting access to the information. If the users are not supposed to have access to a specific application or devices, limit them. Just only the user that is supposed to use that computer will have access to it, and only the applications or the devices or the resources that you have to have access. So you don't give them anything except what they need to do their job, right? So that's how you could do that. Also, the layers have to be diverse. For example, if you go in with your username and a password, like I said, you have to remember a pen, or maybe they'll send you a pen. Your bank will send you a pen and you'll have to type that in. That's 2 layers. So two different things. Um, Also, for example, you're using your ATM card. You have to have your ATM card with you. That's 1 layer. And your pen, that's something that you have to remember. Another layer you can add maybe is your voice. Could be a voice recognition. You have to say something in addition to remembering a number. So it'll be almost impossible for somebody, even if they have your ATM card, they have to know your pen. And even if they have your card and your pen, they're not going to have your voice. So if you have 3 layers like that, it's almost impossible for somebody to break into your system. So you have to have diversity in the layers. Obscurity, you got to make sure that they all that all that information that you're giving to your users, that the outside won't be able to figure it out. All right, so you got to make sure your employees are well aware and well informed that there are people that they could be exploited when they are out there. So they have to be very careful in when they are using their passwords, who they give their password to, or their personal information. Okay, they have to be trained. Simplicity, you want to make it as simple that your employees can follow it easily. And if something goes wrong, you can actually track down and figure out where the problem is. Don't make it too complicated that nobody can follow what you're trying to do in terms of securing your data or your organization. All right, so that's chapter 1. Please write all the information that I told you to. And when you're all done copying that, save it and upload it to week 1. All right, until I see you to next week, next chapter, good luck.